It's so beautiful here at the shores of Lake Ontario in Wellington, Ontario. And I come from here with the Word of God from the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. It's amazing that God has a teaching how we should, as parents, train our children. We are not to allow the street or the TV or their peers to be their major source, or even the school, of teaching them, but we should be the major source of teaching and training our children. I remember, even before I was married, I always wanted to have children. And I wanted to have a lot of children. So when I met Liliana, I asked her if she wanted to have children too, and being as young as she was very reluctant parent at that time. So for the first 6 years of our marriage, we didn't have any children, but since then God has given us 5 children. And it has been really a blessing to have these children. But it's not good enough just to make children and to recreate with God together, procreate together with God, another human being. That's a great joy. It brings joy in our lives. But then there comes the responsibility of raising them up and teaching and training them. And God has a lot to say. It says, teach your son when you walk with him, when you sit down, when you do whatever you do, teach him from the Word of God. It's so important that you and I as parents train our children. Our children need our direction. They need our time, and they need our teaching. We cannot assume that they know what they're supposed to do in their lives if we don't teach them. Basic things about life. Sometimes you might think that they know, they understand. But don't assume it. Open your mouth and teach them. Set an example and go through the variety of things they need to know. Not only to be diligent, but also to plan ahead, to have faith, confidence in the Lord, to make good choices in their lives for their spouse, to marry a believer, to make good choices for their career, to develop their own personal relationship with Jesus, to know how to handle relationships with the opposite sex, to know how to handle money, to know everything that you know and that is good in your life. You and I are supposed to teach our children. We are given that task. It's a command. You know, we can't just make the children and then let them be taught by somebody else, or go and just work and get enough money for their food and clothing and expenses. No, no, no. It's even more important that you and I spend time with them, training them. You might say, what should I teach them? You know, I was teaching my children every day from the Word of God and reading from the Scriptures. And my wife liked it so much, so she says, could you please write that? Could you type it so that we could make it available to others? I said, I can't, because I've forgotten what I taught him, and it takes time to type those things. So she says, could I purchase a tape recorder and record what you are teaching them? And I said, sure, do it. And we did that, recording for over 2.5 years, every day, to collect enough so that for every day of the year we'll have enough teaching segments. And so now we have daily devotionals on our website, and it teaches for each day a new teaching. Those are basically teachings that my wife recorded as I was teaching my children. They've been adapted a little bit for adults, but those are wonderful teachings from the Word of God. So take the book of Proverbs, 1 chapter a day. Take the chapter for that calendar date and teach it. And when you finish the book of Proverbs, take the 10 Commandments, 1 commandment a day. When you finish the 10 Commandments, take the Sermon on the Mount, 1 passage at a time. You don't have to even explain it. Just read it, say a few songs before, sing them, and then a couple of prayers in the end. It'll take maybe 15, 20 minutes at the most, spending time in the Word with your children. And there will be such a smorgasbord, variety of things that the Word of God teaches, like I said, about marrying the right spouse, having faith, how to relate to the opposite sex, how to handle money, how to do whatever we need to do to succeed in our lives. It is all in this Word. And you and I, as parents, are responsible to train our children. And then there is a promise here. Once we train our children, even when he's old, he will not depart from it. You see, we are to teach them the way they should go. In other words, the direction in their lives, the course of life that they should take. And once we have taught them, God promises that they will not depart from it even when they're old. Maybe there might be some bumpy roads on the way, particularly when they become teenagers, but as they grow older and they mature more, they'll turn back to what they have learned from their dad and their mom. There is an anecdotal saying that says, you know, when children are about 3-4 years old, they think Daddy knows everything. When they start going to school and they're 7-8 years of age, they figure quickly that Daddy doesn't know everything. He can't solve some of the math problems or whatever that they bring home from homework. When they're teenagers, sometimes they say, Daddy knows nothing, really. He knows nothing. I can't talk with him and doesn't understand me. When they're about 21 years of age, they say, I can't figure out how come my daddy learned so much in the last 5-6 years. When they're about 30 years, they say, I got to talk to Daddy about this. When they're 40 years, I got to consult with him. And when they're 50, they say, I wish my daddy was around so I could ask him. In other words, Dad's eternal right after all. It says here that they will not depart from it when they're old. They will not retract from it. They will not turn aside from it. But it has to be preceded by you and I consciously taking time and teaching our children. God has given you children. They're a gift from God. If you have a children, you've been blessed to have them. It's your and my responsibility to spend time training them in the way that they should go, the course of life that they should take. And teaching varies as they grow. Once they get out of your home, you can't teach them unless they ask you at that point. So while they're in your home, as long as they're there, look for teachable moments. Teach them all the things, all the truths that you know from the Word of God, what God teaches and what you know is important in life. Everything that God has poured into your heart, you pour into their heart. And when they're old, when they grow, they will follow in that footsteps. We love our children, and that's the way we love them, by taking care of them, and especially in terms of training them. That's what the Lord commands here. It's not a choice. It's not an option. Don't say, I'll teach him or her when they're teenagers, when they understand. No, start teaching them from day one. I started teaching my children when they were in the womb. I would talk to them. And I would tell them, you're welcome in my life. This is going to come in this world, and this is going to be part of your life. When they came in, I took Sarah, I remember when she was just a few days, and I would take her from one window to another, and I said, let me explain you the world. Let me teach you what is important there. And I started teaching at that time. They learned from that time on to listen to my voice. And as they grew, and now teenagers and older, they're following in the footsteps. I asked my daughter, what are you going to teach your children when you grow up? She said, first of all, I'm going to ask my husband to teach every book that he wrote. The book on marriage, so that he will be a good husband and I'll be a good wife. Then I'm going to ask him to read the book on finances that you wrote so that we will handle our money right. And then ask him to read the book on children that you wrote so that we could train our children in the way of the Lord so that they can be blessed and succeed in their lives as well. I want him to teach all of those things as well that you have taught us. And I said, what would you like your children to teach their children? And she said the same thing. It's so important, you see, when you pour your life into your children, it'll come back to you, it'll grow into them, and you will extend your territory and your influence in the generations to come. So take the Word of God, take the time, pour your heart into your children, and build them up to be godly people, mighty in spirit, and responsible citizens, and to create in them a lifestyle, a course of life that will be a blessing both to themselves and to others.